We are live on Facebook right now as we speak, and what an interesting conversation, an important one, because when it comes to this year's elections, man, this is probably one of the hottest contested elections we've had in forever, because there's so much happening within the Western Cape. So nationally, or rather locally, there's a lot happening. Nationally, there's a lot happening, and more so, most recently, with the MK party of Jacob Zuma, who has now publicly threatened violence if certain things are not going to be going their way. To break this down for us further, political commentator Jamie Mighti joins us on Zoom right now, and we are live on Facebook. Jamie, firstly, thank you for taking time out and joining us and speaking about this topic of conversation. Getting straight into it this afternoon, just break it down for us, for those of us who don't really know what the current situation is of Jacob Zuma's MK party possibly not being part of the elections this year.
Thank you so much for having me. So to break it down, where we stand right now is that there is a court application which was made by the ANC against the chief electoral officer, specifically the deputy chief electoral officer. The contents of that particular application were that the approval of the Umkhonto weSizwe party was irregular on a technical basis. The technical basis being that when they launched the application, there were some issues with the paperwork.
Okay.
And then the deputy chief electoral officer then said that they could supplement documents to fix that paperwork and subsequently approved the application. Umkhonto weSizwe says that this was normal. The IEC also says that this was normal and how they do things. But the ANC then said the irregularity was a violation of administrative law because the procedure is that you have to file a new application. So that was the basis of the legal complaint. And we heard arguments in the electoral court, which is seated in Bloemfontein, about this last week. There was supposed to be a judgment today by the time of this particular discussion, but there seems to have been some last-minute changes made to the judgment. This sometimes happen. People are speculating why this happened on a case of such a serious nature.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, the judgment is not out. It is supposed to be out tomorrow. So going now to the question of threats of violence, we have seen some members of Umkhonto weSizwe on social media, not directly on social media, but on posts which were reshared on social media, making statements that there would be violence if Umkhonto weSizwe was not allowed to participate in the election. Some of them said they were making these statements in their personal capacity, and those are not the views of the party. But we have to take everything into context, and part of the context is that there has been a history of electoral violence in KwaZulu-Natal, and that has continued to date. It does not take a long Google search to find one or another, ANC politician or politician in KwaZulu-Natal who has been gunned down even in the last month. So that is part of the context. The other part of the context is that we saw that there was widespread violence in the early 90s as a result of inter-party fighting between Umkhonto weSizwe and the ANC. And just going to a more recent example, we all saw what happened in 2021 after the judgment that Zuma should go to prison for his contempt of court. We saw that there was massive looting and riots in Gauteng, but particularly also in KwaZulu-Natal, in Durban and other parts of KwaZulu-Natal. So the burning of the trucks, all of this is part of the context of these conversations. So we cannot take lightly, or we cannot ignore or dismiss that there is still an undercurrent of violence in South African politics, and that there's still generally a culture of violence in broader South African society. And in Africa, we often do see, because we must also not forget that we are still on this continent of Africa, we often do see that electoral violence, if issues are not handled with diplomacy, with due care, can end up being part of the electoral cycle, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's again one of those things which you have rightfully mentioned, that we cannot look away, although, they've made the statement to say that they've shared this within their own capacity. But the fact that all of this really comes under the banner of Jacob Zuma, again, as you referred to, the unrest that took place back in 2021. Some of the comments made by the members from the party was the following. we are sending a loud and clear message to the ANC that if these courts, which are sometimes captured, if they stop MK, there will be anarchy in the country. There will be riots like you've never seen in the country. There will be no elections. No South Africans will go to the polls. Now, we've also seen some political parties go ahead, some politicians also walking around with bodyguards that has weapons that walks into spaces with guns that are completely armed. So in light of this information, and I know you've said that there's a ruling that's supposed to come down now this afternoon, but in light of this information being shared, do you think that if push comes to shove, that the MK party would actually follow through when it comes to the elections? Do you think they would go to that extent and incite violence?
Well, when I go to church, when they take the tithe and offering, they do lock the building down for security purposes. This is just one of the things that is a reality in South Africa because of the extent of the violent crime. And as you're talking about, how politicians move around with, some of them are now moving around with security details. Some of them wear bulletproof vests, etc. This is part of politics on the ground in South Africa. It's part of just living in real South Africa. We all know that there are security companies, patrolling many of the roads in the suburbs. We know that everyone who doesn't have high level security has a pit bull or some kind of aggressive dog, simply because we live in an insecure country, to be quite frank with you. And to put it in perspective further, if you look at the World Economic Forum Global Competitiveness Index report, the last one, which ranked countries on the basis of a variety of indices, South Africa ranked 118th out of 141 countries in terms of crime. So when it comes to crime, South Africa has high levels of crime, and particularly violent crime. In some instances, we have more crime happening in South Africa than happens in war-torn countries. Going back now to the question about what is likely to happen.
Yeah.
I do think that there will be some people, if Umkhonto weSizwe is removed from the election at this stage, because as you must be aware, we are about 63 days away from the election now, and that is just a matter of a few weeks. If the MK were to be removed now, there may be some elements within that party who would feel hard done by, who would feel aggrieved, and may take matters into their own hands outside of there being an official party instruction, simply because if you have a party which has potentially 1 million supporters, even if 10,000 people decide that they are going to wreak mayhem as a result of the fact that, once again, the leader that they admire and support has been stymied illegitimately by the legal system. And this is a perception that already exists in those circles. It's an undercurrent. You may see some of that happening. And because of what happened in 2021, I don't rule out the possibility that if Umkhonto weSizwe is removed in this fashion, we may then have a more turbulent electoral period than we anticipated, particularly because we are in a period of time right now where this is the most contested election. You can see the level of contestation sometimes by how many parties contesting who have a viable shot to get seats, and also how funding is flowing. There are a lot of opposition entities that are receiving large amounts of money, 2 million rands, 3 million rands, 15 million rands, and there are also a large amount of opposition entities that are also vying to grow their voter share and be part of a coalition government. Because of all of those dynamics, and because the ANC has been, in the last 3 polls that have come out, been polling at worst 38%, but at most 45%. There's a real concern, definitely, then, that we are going into a change period, and that is the level of contestation. Change in and of itself, even if you were to look at it from a spiritual lens, comes with a lot of unrest. It comes with a lot of turbulence, simply because if you think about a birth process, any process where there's change, even if it's a volcano or anything that comes with change, it's often very turbulent. And this is the season that we are in right now. We are in a season potentially of transition, a season of change. and there may very well be turbulence. And this could be one of the seeds of turbulence in particular, because this was something that nobody expected in, let's say, August of last year. But as we got into December, the Umkhonto weSizwe was announced as a party that Jacob Zuma would be campaigning for as their lead campaigner, and we are now where we are in towards the end of March. So we're in April, just next week. So if you think about the proximity of this particular decision, it's coming tomorrow. There are reasons to remain aware and alert and cautious, and be aware that, Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And rightfully so. I mean, we are going to have to keep a really, really, really close eye on this. And so tomorrow's verdict is really going to kind of shape the elections, especially when it comes to violence and what things are looking like. And earlier on, you also touched on how this is one of the hugely contested spaces now when we are speaking about the elections. And speaking about a very contested space, the Western Cape has been widely contested at the moment. So much so that a poll that came out, which was surprising in all honesty, because since 2009, the DA has always had the majority share within the Western Cape. But according to a survey done by Victory Research, it shows that the Democratic Alliance might lose the majority vote right here within the Western Cape since 2009. And so coming to a close this afternoon, is it surprising to you, Jamie, that the DA might not come out on top within the Western Cape this year?
Not particularly, and I'll start just because we are on a Christian platform to say, as you know how the saying goes, a house divided against itself cannot stand.
Yeah.
And since 2019, we have seen multiple divisions within the Democratic Alliance. We've seen a multiple exodus of leaders, from Mmusi Maimane, Herman Mashaba, Phumzile Van Dam. The list is quite long. John Moodley, Athol Trollip. And the fact that you can go through 10, 15, 20 names and mention them, and people will know who those people are. Bongani Baloyi. This is an indicator that the DA is fractured, and its base that it used to enjoy since even 2009 is no longer speaking in unison. And as a result of that, there was already a crisis. But trying to shift away from some of the ideologies and the rhetoric of Mmusi Maimane, John Steenhuisen and Helen Zille took the party a little bit to the right wing. And in so doing, they alienated some of the black voters who are a little bit to the left wing, who care about affirmative action, who care about, progressive policies. So as things stand, it's not surprising that they will have some challenges with voter share and may even lose governance of the Western Cape. This is part of what they have to be aware of. And to be quite honest with you, it's halftime right now. There's still some time. The DA has to campaign and make a value proposition that is more attractive to voters in the Western Cape.
Sure. Jamie, thank you so much. And of course, leading up to the election, which takes place in May, we of course going to have some more conversations around this. But the highlight of it all today is the fact that we are keeping an eye on that decision regarding tomorrow. And I think that is an important one. And then hopefully, if all goes well tomorrow, hopefully we won't have some chaotic violence come election out in the month of May. But for now, Jamie, thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. That was Jamie Mighti right there. And I mean, what a